I am Katherine Johnson, Precinct E, Planning. I am also chair of the study committee that considered whether the property at 323 Washington Street, known as the Stanwood House, should become the fifth single-building local historic district in Wellesley. This is Article 14. If Article 14 is approved, the Stanwood property will receive historic designation, and we will amend the zoning map of the town by adding an overlay on the entire property to show that it is an historic district. Article 14 is sponsored by the Planning Board, the Historic District Commission, and the Historical Commission. I would like to thank the other members of the study committee for their dedication and significant work in this endeavor. Amy Griffith, Historic District Commission, Tom Payne, Historic District Commission and Historical Society, Jacob Lilly, Wellesley Historical Commission, and Jared Parker, President of the Historical Society. Creating a single-building local historic district starts with a request from the owner. The Wellesley Historical Society, the owner of this property since 2012, made that request of the town in 2019. The property is located in Wellesley Hills, on the north side of Washington Street, between Elm Park and Cliff Road. It is to the west of the Unitarian Church and across from the Phillips Building, which was our first high school from 1894 to 1911. The Wellesley Historical Society is a nonprofit 501c3, not a town board. Nellie Fisk, the daughter of Joseph E. Fisk, founded the society in 1925. It archives town historic records and collections, and it supports town historic efforts. The society wants to use 323 Washington Street as its annex and for archival storage. The Stanwood House sits in a general residence district, where certain business uses are allowed. However, these uses create obligations for parking, universal access, etc., that would be unnecessary and onerous for the society to undertake. Therefore, the society worked with the selectmen, planning, and the zoning enforcement officer to find a solution within the zoning bylaws that would accommodate the needs of the society. We determined that it would be possible to create a zoning map overlay for 323 Washington without actually removing the property from the general residence district. The overlay would allow fewer restrictive obligations and an easier pathway to a new use. This does not change the base district from general residence. It only creates an overlay on the zoning map. So, in June 2019, the Board of Selectmen created a study committee that was required to produce a report determining if 323 Washington Street should be designated a single-building local historic district, and to bring this issue to town meeting for its approval. The draft study report was completed in December 2019 and submitted to the Massachusetts Historical Commission for review. Mass Historic accepted it in March of 2020. There are many criteria that determine if a building should be designated as a local historic district. The most significant three are the architecture and/or architect, the historic narrative of the building, builder, or the owner, and how the property or ownership contributed to the development of the town. First, architecture and architect. 323 Washington Street is an outstandingly well-preserved example of pre-World War I colonial revival architecture. Its technical subcategory is asymmetrical, with a front door that is both recessed and off-center. The house was built in 1916. It was a doctor's residence with an accessory office. The architect was from Boston, the renowned Luther C. Greenleaf, whose work in Dedham, Brookline, and Wellesley was greatly admired by Isaac Sprague. Greenleaf designed more than a dozen houses in the Belvedere Estates and elsewhere in town. He designed the former Rockridge School, and he also designed the Wobbin Block in Wellesley Square. That's our favorite setting for Tutto Italiano. Second, historical narrative. Frederick A. and Jeanette S. Stanwood bought the property from the Maugus Realty Trust, owned by Isaac Sprague, Albion Clapp, and Clarence Bunker. They built the house with its office in 1916 and lived there until 1975. Dr. Stanwood, who was a graduate of Wellesley High School, Bowdoin College in 1902, and Harvard Medical School in 1907, worked in Boston with Dr. Elliot Jocelyn. He moved back to Wellesley to start his own practice in 1912. That was a time when doctors made house calls. Few patients went to hospitals or even had office visits. He joined the Board of Health, but took a leave to serve as a major in the Army Medical Corps in World War I. Once back in Wellesley, Dr. Stanwood served as chair of the Board of Health for 45 years, from 1918 until 1963, when he finally retired. As chair, he automatically became the school physician. He oversaw the advancement in public health protocols with vaccinations, with annual school physicals, including vision and hearing tests, as well as posture tests for scoliosis, with fluoridation in Wellesley's drinking water, and with first aid and EMT training. Mrs. Stanwood was a Dana Hall student who then trained as a nurse at New York Presbyterian Hospital. She was instrumental in first aid training in Wellesley with her husband. She was a driver for the American Red Cross during World War II, and she held a prominent position within the Wellesley chapter of the American Red Cross. Third, a contribution to Wellesley. In order to understand how the Stanwood House and how Dr. and Mrs. Stanwood contributed to Wellesley's growth, it helps to know that pre-World War I, the town was simply rural farmland, essentially remaining the north and the west precincts of Needham. The 1910 census put our population at merely 5,413. Wellesley Hills was just a collection of wood-framed houses, with only a few commercial buildings, and many of those were built in wood. Medicine and public health awareness were in their infancy, relying on home visits by doctors, isolation and quarantine to mitigate infection, and pandemics. There was little preventative care. There were no vaccines. There were few screenings. Following World War I, Wellesley entered a period of residential and commercial growth that was unparalleled, even by the construction we see today. There was a great influx of families, creating the need for schools, local commercial businesses, and public health and safety protocols. Buildings, even residences, became more complex and often were made using noble materials such as brick or stone or stucco. By 1960, the census determined that Wellesley had grown nearly fivefold in 50 years. Its population was now 26,071. Dr. Stanwood was the mainstay of this growth as the chair of the Board of Health. This is my favorite photo. It shows Dr. Stanwood at 323 Washington Street examining a very young and very happy patient while Mom looks on. And I'd like all of you to know that Dr. and Mrs. Stanwood's grandson and granddaughter-in-law still live in Wellesley, residing in Precinct H. A heartfelt thanks to Bill and Janice Stanwood for their help with our research. The Society will continue to use the Dadman McNamara House at 229 Washington Street as its headquarters, but will move the archives to the Stanwood House. The building will also provide research and display space and will house the offices of the director and the archivist. Among the benefits that come with historic designation are the recognition and preservation of a very important town asset, a tribute to Dr. and Mrs. Stanwood for their contribution to Wellesley, and this will become an appropriate benefit to the Historical Society with no additional cost to the town. The sponsors and the Stanwood family ask for your favorable vote. Thank you.